It was supposed to be a normal afternoon. My daughter was just walking across our own land, the same yard she's played in since she learned how to walk. But suddenly, I heard her scream, a scream no parent ever forgets. I ran outside and saw two men in cheap, fake HOA uniforms blocking her path. One of them had a gun pointed straight at her like she was a criminal. My daughter froze, terrified, her hands shaking in the air. "Step back," the fake officer shouted at her. "You're trespassing on our land." Their badges looked wrong. Their uniforms didn't match. And the fear they were trying to cause was very real. And they didn't know the man they were threatening was the police chief of the county. Before I tell you what happened next, tell me where you're watching from. And please hit subscribe for more stories where the good guys always win. It was supposed to be a normal afternoon. Nothing unusual, nothing dangerous, just another peaceful day on our land. The kind of place where the wind moves softly through the pine trees and the lake reflects the sky like a mirror. My daughter loved walking around the property. She knew every corner of this land, every stone, every trail. She grew up here. She felt safe here. But that day, safety disappeared in one scream. I heard it from inside the cabin. Sharp, terrified, and high-pitched, a scream no parent ever forgets, a sound that cuts through your bones and turns your blood cold. I dropped the mug in my hand and sprinted out the door. My heart pounded so hard I could barely hear my own footsteps. What I saw froze me in place. Two men stood on the edge of our property line, wearing uniforms that looked like they came from a discount store. Cheap fabric, crooked badges, mismatched belts. One badge said HOA enforcement, but the letters were peeling off. Their boots didn't match each other, and one officer's radio looked like a plastic toy. But the worst part wasn't their uniforms. It was the gun. One of the fake officers had a pistol pointed directly at my daughter. She stood there trembling, tears streaming down her cheeks, her hands raised in the air. She wasn't arguing. She wasn't moving. She was too scared to breathe. "Step back," the fake officer yelled. "You're trespassing on our land." My daughter gasped, her voice barely a whisper. "Daddy, help." Before she could finish, the second fake officer grabbed her arm roughly, twisting it behind her back as if she were some criminal resisting arrest. "Move again," he growled, "and this gets worse." Her knees buckled. She cried harder, struggling to stay upright. I felt something inside me ignite, fear, rage, instinct, all mixing into one sharp, unstoppable force. I took a step forward, but the man with the gun snapped the weapon toward me. "Back off," he barked. "This is HOA property business." HOA business? With guns? On land I legally owned? Every detail of them screamed fake uniforms, fake authority, fake bravery. But the fear they were causing, that was real. I forced myself to breathe. I forced myself not to lunge at them. I forced myself to think like an officer, not a furious father. "Let her go," I said steadily. "She hasn't done anything," the gun-wielding man sneered. "She crossed the line, and that means she answers to us," my daughter sobbed. "Please, I didn't. I was just walking." The second man tightened his grip. "We don't care. You and your family think you own everything out here. But when the HOA makes a rule, you follow it." The irony almost made me laugh. They were enforcing rules on land I owned, land the county recognized under my name, land I had patrolled for years, land these criminals had no authority on. But they didn't know that, not yet, because the greatest mistake they ever made was not checking who lived here. They had no idea the man they were threatening, the man they were pointing a gun at, wasn't just a father. He was the police chief of the entire county. My badge was inside my jacket. I could feel the weight of it against my chest, the real authority, the real power they thought they had. I stepped forward slowly, raising one hand to show I wasn't reaching for a weapon. My daughter looked at me with desperate eyes, begging me to help her. "Put the gun down," I said calmly. "Before you do something you can't undo." The man scoffed. "I said don't move." But I kept walking, steady, controlled, determined. "What are you doing?" he snapped, voice cracking. I didn't answer. Their uniforms might fool a frightened child. Their shouting might scare a neighbor, but nothing about them fooled me. Their stances were sloppy. Their trigger discipline was terrible. Their approach was untrained. They weren't officers. They weren't HOA agents. They were criminals pretending to be something they weren't. I reached into my jacket slowly. The man panicked. "Hey, hands out, right now." His gun shook. He was scared, more scared than he wanted to admit. But it was too late. I pulled out my badge. It shined in the sunlight, a real badge, heavy and unmistakable. The reaction was instant. The gunman's face drained of color. His hand trembled so badly he almost dropped the pistol. The second officer loosened his grip on my daughter as if he had just grabbed fire. You're, the gunman stammered. I held the badge higher. Yes, I said. I'm the police chief. Silence fell like a hammer. My daughter's eyes widened with relief. The second fake officer stumbled backward, losing his balance. The gunman lowered his weapon slowly, panicked and shaking. Everything about their fake courage collapsed. They had threatened a child on the land of the highest-ranking law officer in the county with a gun. Their world, their scam, their plan just shattered. The moment I lifted my badge, the entire energy in the air changed. The fake officer holding the gun didn't just hesitate. He froze. His hand trembled so violently that the weapon wobbled in the air. His eyes darted between my badge and my face as if trying to figure out whether this was a nightmare or reality. You're the chief? He whispered, his voice cracking like dry wood. I stepped forward slowly, positioning my body between him and my daughter. She clung to the back of my shirt, crying softly, her fear pouring out in shaky breaths. I could feel her trembling through the fabric. Yes, I said calmly, I'm the police chief, and you just pointed a gun at my daughter? The second fake officer stiffened. His grip on my daughter weakened instantly. His face shifted from fake authority to pure panic. He looked around the yard desperately, like he expected someone to tell him what to do. We were told she was trespassing, he stammered, trying to sound confident, but failing miserably. Trespassing, I repeated sharply. On my property? Land that I own? Land that I protected for years? My voice echoed across the yard, and both men flinched, like they'd been struck. My daughter pressed closer to me, hiding behind my leg. I could feel her tears soaking into my shirt as she whispered, Daddy, don't let them hurt me. I won't, I said softly, without looking away from the gunman. I held my badge high again. Drop the gun. Now, the taller fake officer swallowed hard. His lips trembled. Sweat trickled down the side of his face. He looked like a scared kid who had just realized he picked a fight with the wrong person. He slowly lowered the weapon, inch by inch, until it pointed at the ground. My jaw tightened, but I kept my voice controlled. Good, I said. Now put it on the ground. He obeyed, placing the gun gently on the dirt. His partner finally let go of my daughter, stepping back like she was on fire. She stumbled into my arms, crying uncontrollably now. I wrapped one arm around her shoulder, keeping my other hand ready. I glared at the two fake officers. Who sent you? Neither spoke. That silence was louder than a scream. The fear in their eyes told me everything. These weren't men acting alone. Someone else was behind this, someone dangerous, someone who thought they could scare families off their land, someone who thought we were bigger than the law. I took a step closer to them. Tell me, who ordered you to come here? The shorter, fake officer's voice cracked. We don't know his real name. We just call him Dalton, there it was. The name I'd heard in whispers for months. A ghost in the woods, a shadow, behind multiple property scams. A bully who used fear instead of paperwork. A man who thought the law couldn't touch him. And Dalton told you to pull a gun on a child? I asked. The tall gunman shook his head quickly. No, we were told to scare her, to keep her away from the boundary line. We didn't know she was your daughter. You think that helps you? I growled. He dropped to his knees, panic taking over. Please, Chief, please. We didn't want to do this. Dalton said we had no choice. He said if we didn't follow orders, he'd hurt you, I finished. Both men nodded quickly. Fear, that was the real weapon Dalton used. Fear kept these criminals in line. Fear pushed them onto my land. Fear made them point a gun at a child. But fear wasn't going to save them now. My daughter tugged my sleeve gently. Daddy, I'm scared. I know, honey, I whispered, keeping her close. But you're safe now. I kept my eyes on the gunman. Step away from the weapon. He slid back on his knees, raising both hands high in the air. The shorter officer did the same, tears gathering in his eyes. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a pair of handcuffs. You both are under arrest, I said. Kidnapping, assault on a minor, attempted property fraud, impersonating law enforcement, and pointing a firearm at a child. Their faces turned ghost white. Chief, please, the short man begged. "We didn't want to do this. It was Dalton's plan. I don't care whose plan was," I said firmly. "You carried it out." My daughter squeezed my arm. "Dad, can we go inside now?" "Soon," I said gently. Stay right behind me." I cuffed the taller man first, pulling his hands behind his back. His arms shook so hard, it was difficult to lock the cuffs in place. The shorter officer didn't resist either. He fell into the cuffs like someone who had been waiting to be rescued from his own choices. After restraining both men, I pulled my phone from my pocket and called dispatch. "This is Chief," I said. "I need immediate backup at my location. 2 suspects in custody. 1 firearm recovered. Potential connection to the Dalton operation." My daughter looked up at me. "Daddy, who's Dalton?" I took a slow breath. "Someone who's been hurting a lot of people. And someone who made the mistake of coming after our family." The fake officers trembled harder when I said that. They knew what was coming next. They knew Dalton's secret world was about to collapse, and I wasn't done yet, not even close. This wasn't just about land anymore. This was about justice. This was about my daughter. This was about every family Dalton had threatened. Backup was on the way. The truth was coming out, and Dalton's time was running out. The fake officers knelt in the dirt, hands raised, trying to look obedient. But the fear written across their faces wasn't for me. It was for someone else. Someone they feared more than the police, more than prison, more than getting caught pointing a gun at a child. Inside the cabin, my daughter stood behind the window, both hands pressed against the glass, her eyes wide and full of tears. She didn't want to cry, but her body wouldn't stop shaking. The impact of what these men had just done to her was still fresh, and the sound of her soft sobs cut deeper than any knife ever could. I kept my gun pointed at the 2 men, but spoke with a calm, firm voice. "Move an inch," I warned, "and you won't like what happens next." They didn't dare. The taller officer swallowed hard, trying to control his breathing. The shorter man's shoulders trembled uncontrollably, and tears streamed down his dirty cheeks. Their fake HOA badges glinted in the sunlight, peeling at the corners. These weren't officers at all. They were pawns, scared pawns. I stepped closer. "Who told you to threaten my daughter?" The taller man stared at the ground. He couldn't meet my eyes, not after what he had done. His voice came out small, like a child confessing to something terrible. "Dalton," he whispered. "We work for Dalton." The name hit the air like a cold wind. Dalton, a name I had heard too many times. A name tied to land theft, fraud, intimidation, forced evictions. But every time we searched for him, he was gone. Like a ghost that only appeared when people were scared enough to obey him. My jaw tightened. "Dalton sent you to my property?" The taller man nodded once. He said, "This land, it's valuable. He wants it for himself." I clenched my fists so tightly my knuckles cracked. The shorter officer finally spoke, his voice shaking so badly it almost didn't sound like words. "If we don't do what he says, Dalton will kill us. He doesn't forgive mistakes. He doesn't care about anyone." His eyes lifted, looking directly at me for the first time. In them, I saw pure terror. Not fear of prison, not fear of being caught, but fear of a man hiding somewhere beyond the trees. "Dalton watches everything," he whispered. "He told us your daughter walked too close to the line. He said she crossed into his future property." My daughter, still crying inside the cabin, put her small hand against the window. I felt my heart twist. She had nearly been taken from me because she walked on her own land. "He said she trespassed?" I repeated slowly. The taller man nodded quickly. "He told us no one would question it, no one would fight us." He paused, then added quietly, "He didn't tell us you were the chief." His voice trembled with regret. Not moral regret, but regret for choosing the wrong target. "Dalton didn't warn us," he whispered. "Dalton doesn't warn anyone," I said coldly. The shorter officer dropped his head into his hands. "We're dead," he mumbled. "Dalton's going to find out we failed. He's going to come for us." I took one step forward, lowering my voice. "And what do you think I'm going to do?" Silence. The only sound was the soft, painful crying of my daughter behind me. I kept my weapon trained on them while I backed toward the cabin door. I didn't take my eyes off them for a second. I opened the door just enough to speak to my daughter. "Honey," I said softly, "go upstairs and stay there. Lock the door. Daddy is here." She nodded, wiping her eyes with shaking hands. "Don't leave me, Daddy." Her voice broke, and something inside me broke with it. "I'm not going anywhere, I promised. You're safe." She slowly stepped back, shutting the door between us. Now it was just me and the two men who had terrified my little girl. Face down, I ordered, arms straight. Out. They did as they were told. Their knees hit the gravel, their hands stretched into the dirt. Their breath came out in quick, panic puffs. The taller officer tried to speak again. Chief, please, just arrest us. Don't tell Dalton. If he hears we talk, Dalton won't hear anything, I said, walking behind them. Hope flickered in the short man's eyes. Hope that I meant protection. Then I finished because by the time I get to him, he'll be in handcuffs or a hospital bed. Both men shut their eyes tight. The truth of what I said settled into their bones like winter frost. Dalton wasn't the only one to fear anymore. I holstered my weapon and reached for my radio. Dispatch, this is Chief. I need immediate units at my location. 2 suspects in custody. Armed threat toward a minor. Both claimed connection to Dalton. Copy that, Chief. Units are en route, the dispatcher replied. I paced slowly in front of the 2 men. Their faces were pressed into the gravel. Sweat ran down their foreheads. Dalton watches everything, the taller man repeated. He could be watching now. I looked toward the woods. Tall pines, heavy shadows, quiet wind. And for a moment I felt a chill crawl up my spine. Maybe he had been watching all along, watching my home, watching my daughter, watching my land. But if he thought his time was coming, he was right. Just not the way he expected. Backup was coming. The truth was unraveling, and Dalton's invisible control over this county was about to snap. What these 2 men didn't realize was simple. When they pointed a gun at my daughter, they didn't just break the law, they awakened the wrong man. Sirens echoed across the mountains like rolling thunder. They grew louder with every passing second, bouncing off the tall pine trees and shaking the quiet valley awake. My daughter stood pressed against my side, her small fingers gripping my shirt as if letting go would make the world collapse again. The 2 fake HOA officers lay face down on the dirt, hands cuffed behind them, breathing fast and shallow. They knew what was coming. They knew their little world of lies had ended the moment I showed my badge. Now all they could do was tremble and hope Dalton wouldn't find out before we reached the station. The first patrol car skidded into the clearing, tires spraying gravel, then another. Then a third. Red and blue lights spiraled across the trees, painting the forest in flashing color. The sound was overwhelming. Sirens, radios, boots hitting the ground. But after the gun had been pointed at my daughter, the noise felt like relief. Officers poured out of the vehicles, weapons ready. Chief, report, Sergeant Willis yelled as he rushed toward me. I'm fine, I said. My daughter is safe. Willis glanced down at the 2 criminals on the ground and shook his head. These the ones? Yeah, I replied. Fake HOA. They threatened her with a loaded weapon, Willis swore under his breath. Animals, he signaled to 2 deputies, who approached the men carefully. Hands where we can see them. A deputy barked, even though the men were already cuffed. Standard procedure. Fake officers sometimes tried to act tough until the very last second. The shorter criminal sobbed, mumbling about Dalton, about orders, about how he didn't want to hurt anyone. The taller one stayed silent but stiffened when 2 officers lifted him off the ground. An officer picked up the fake HOA badge and held it between his fingers. The cheap metal bent instantly. Looks like something from a Halloween store, he muttered. Another officer inspected the gun they had dropped earlier. He pulled the slide back, checked the chamber, and grimaced. It's loaded, he said, safety off. They were ready to fire. A chill raw through me. One wrong move, one shaky finger, one moment of panic, and my daughter could have been gone before I reached them. My fists tightened so hard my knuckles cracked. My daughter felt my anger and pressed closer, her face buried in my side, her tears soaked into my shirt. I was so scared, she whispered. I know, sweetheart, I said gently. They'll never touch you again. She held on to me even tighter, as if she feared they would somehow break free. Officers swarmed the fake patrol truck next. It was an old beat-up SUV with a magnetic HOA enforcement sticker slapped on the door. The sticker was crooked and already peeling at the edges. Nothing about it looked real. Chief, Officer Ramirez called from the back of the truck. You need to see this. I approached slowly, my daughter staying behind with a female officer who gently took her hand. Inside the truck was a disturbing collection. Stacks of forged property transfer papers, fake trespassing citations, envelopes pre-written with threats, photos of houses around the county, maps marked with red X's, potential targets. And then I saw it. A photo of my daughter walking near our driveway. My blood froze. Willis picked it up, his expression turning dark. They were watching your house. No, I said. Dalton was watching. Ramirez reached deeper and pulled out a black binder. The front was labeled Property Claims, Priority List. The first page showed a satellite image of my property outlined in red. Chief, Willis said carefully, you were target number 1. My jaw tightened so hard it hurt. Dalton had been watching us, plotting, studying our movements, waiting for the moment he thought we were vulnerable. And he chose the moment my daughter walked alone. Behind us, one of the criminals suddenly screamed, "We had no choice." Dalton said the land was his. He said we had to scare her. He said, "Shut it." A deputy snapped, shoving him into the back of a patrol car. The short one broke down crying. "He'll kill us. Dalton will kill us if he knows we failed." Willis looked at me. "Chief, this is worse than we thought." I nodded slowly. Dalton has eyes everywhere. And a system. The officers finished loading evidence bags. Radios crackled. Boots crunched over gravel. The fake officers were shoved into the back seats of the cruisers, crying and begging like children, caught in a storm. But then something strange happened. The taller criminal lifted his head and whispered, almost too quietly to hear, "He's watching right now." Willis frowned. "Who?" "Dalton," the man whispered. "He said he can see everything from the tree line." My stomach tightened. I looked toward the edge of the forest, the same dark line of trees my daughter had walked near before everything happened. Pine branches swayed softly. Birds chirped in the distance. Quiet wind moved through the leaves, nothing visible, but something felt wrong. A presence, a tension, a pair of eyes in the shadows. Dalton wasn't juice. Tea, a rumor. Dalton was real, and he was closer than any of us realized. I placed my hand on my daughter's head. "Get her inside," I told the female officer. "Stay with her." She nodded and gently guided my daughter back toward the cabin. Willis walked up beside me. "Chief, what's the next step?" I stared at the dark woods. The same woods where Dalton watched, planned, hunted. "We find him," I said quietly but firmly. "Tonight, tomorrow. Doesn't matter. He comes off my land." Willis nodded. "We're with you." The patrol cars slowly pulled away, carrying the fake officers toward the station. Their cries faded with the sound of the engines. As the last car disappeared down the road, the forest fell silent again. A calm too calm. A quiet too controlled. A silence that felt like it was waiting. Dalton had sent his men. They failed, and now he knew. He wouldn't hide for long. He wouldn't forgive failure, and he definitely wouldn't walk away. This wasn't over, not even close. At the station, the 2 fake HOA officers broke faster than anyone expected. Fear was eating them alive. They weren't afraid of prison. They were afraid of Dalton. Every time one of them said his name, their voices dropped to a whisper, as if Dalton could hear them through the walls. "Dalton made us do it," the taller one said, shaking so hard the table rattled. "He picks the houses he wants," the shorter man added. "He watches families for weeks. He knows the schedule, the routines, everything." I sat across from them, my jaw tight, fists clenched. "Why my daughter? Why my land?" The tall man swallowed, eyes red. "Because Dalton said your property is the most valuable in the whole county. He wants the lake access, the woods, the privacy, everything." My stomach tightened. Dalton hadn't just sent these men randomly. He had targeted us deliberately. He also said your house was his. "Next project," the shorter criminal whispered. The words hit harder than any punch I'd ever taken. Dalton had been watching my daughter, watching my home, watching my family. The moment I heard that, something inside me shifted from fury to focus. This wasn't just a case anymore. It was personal. I stood up, gear up. "We're going after him." My team didn't hesitate. They followed me out of the interrogation room instantly. We moved through the station like thunder, quick, precise, coordinated. Officers grabbed rifles, vests, radios. Engines roared to life outside. The air was heavy with urgency. Dalton wasn't getting away, not tonight. We drove deep into the woods, following a hidden dirt road only criminals and hunters ever used. The deeper we went, the thicker the air became. Fog snaked low across the ground. The trees leaned in, dark and towering, as if trying to hide something. Or someone. "Chief," Sergeant Willis said from the passenger seat, "you think he knows we're coming?" I stared forward. "He knows everything. We don't surprise a man like Dalton. We overpower him." The road narrowed until branches scraped the sides of the vehicles, and the tires dipped into old ruts carved by years of illegal traffic. The forest felt alive, listening, waiting. Finally, through the trees, we saw it. A rusty trailer sat crooked on uneven ground, patched with metal scraps, smoke drifting from a thin chimney pipe. Tools, trash, and old car parts littered the clearing. A handmade fence of broken logs surrounded the area. Dalton lived like a man who trusted nobody and wanted nobody near him. We cut the engines. Doors opened silently. My officers moved into position like wolves encircling their prey. I stepped forward first. Dalton walked out of the trailer before I even called his name. He was big, taller than me, broad-shouldered, with a thick beard and eyes sharp enough to cut through steel. He looked like he lived in the woods, breathed the woods, owned the woods. "So," he said with a slow smirk, "the police chief finally shows up." My hand hovered near my weapon. "Dalton Hayes, step forward and put your hands where I can see them." He chuckled, a low, cold sound that raised the hairs on my arms. "You know," he said, "your daughter trespassed on my future land." My heart thumped, but I kept my voice level. "She walked on my land. She walked on the land your men tried to steal." His smile faded instantly. "That girl nearly ruined everything," he said. "So I sent my men to fix the problem by pointing a gun at a child." I snapped. He shrugged. "Sometimes fear is the only language people understand." "Behind me," Willis whispered. "He's not going to come in peacefully." I stepped closer. "Why target us, Dalton? Why my land?" His eyes darkened. "Because you're in the way. This whole county will belong to me one day. The lake, the forest, the cabins, all of it." He pointed to the ground. "It starts right here." I'd heard enough. "Dalton Hayes," I said loudly, drawing my weapon, "you are under arrest for—" He moved fast, too fast for a man his size. His hand darted behind his back, reaching for something hidden in his waistband. "Weapon!" Willis yelled. Time slowed. I saw his fingers curl around a handle. I saw the metal glint. I saw his muscles tense to swing, aim, fire, whatever weapon he had, but my officers were already on him. 3 bodies slammed into Dalton before he could draw the gun. They drove him backward into the dirt with explosive force. "GET, your hands behind your back. Drop IT now. Stop resisting." Dalton roared like an animal, twisting and thrashing, but he was outnumbered. 4 officers piled on, securing his arms, forcing his face into the ground. Finally, the clack of handcuffs filled the clearing. Dalton's voice was muffled by dirt. "You think this stops anything?" I stepped closer, lowering my weapon. For the first time, he looked afraid, not of me, not of the law, but of losing the power he thought was permanent. "You're done," I said quietly. "You threatened my daughter. You threatened my home. You threatened my county." Dalton growled. "There will always be others." I leaned down, staring him in the eyes. "Maybe," I said, "but tonight it's you behind bars." 2 officers hauled him to his feet. His clothes were ripped, his face scraped, and his wrists locked in steel. The forest that once hid him now felt small, exposed. As they dragged him toward the patrol car, he shouted, "This isn't over, Chief. This isn't—" The car door slammed, cutting him off. The woods went quiet again. For the first time since the scream that started all this, I felt the air lift from my chest. Dalton was caught, my daughter was safe, and justice was finally taking root where fear once lived. But I knew one thing. This victory was big, but the story wasn't finished yet. Dalton's roar echoed through the forest as officers dragged him toward the patrol car. His voice bounced between the trees like thunder trying to cling to the sky. "You think this ends with me?" he shouted, thrashing against the cuffs. "You think you've won? There will always be others, always." The officers barely reacted. They had heard threats from men like him before, criminals who thought fear made them powerful. But today, fear wasn't working. I walked up slowly, each step steady, controlled, filled with the weight of everything this day had been. My daughter stood just behind me, her hand wrapped tightly around mine. She watched Dalton with wide eyes, not scared anymore, but curious, like she was seeing the monster unmasked. Dalton's wild eyes swung toward me. "Chief, you don't understand how deep this goes." I stopped inches from him. The officers paused, keeping him restrained but giving us space. "You're right," I said quietly. "But today, you end." Dalton lunged forward, but the cuffs jerked him back. His rage filled the clearing, but underneath it, for the first time, I saw fear. Not fear of the police, fear of losing control, fear of being nothing. He glared at me. You're making enemies you don't even know exist. I lowered my voice. You pointed a gun at my daughter. That makes you the only enemy I care about. His jaw tightened. His shoulders slumped. For a moment he stopped fighting, like he finally understood that no amount of shouting could change his fate. 2 deputies shoved him into the back seat of the patrol car. One closed the door. The sound was sharp, final, satisfying. Dalton slammed his shoulder against the window once, but it didn't budge. The flashing lights painted his face red and blue as the reality sank in. He wasn't in control anymore. His empire of fear had collapsed. His men had confessed, and the police chief he tried to be, Reek, was the one who took him down. My daughter exhaled softly, a breath she'd been holding since the moment the gun was pointed at her. Daddy, she whispered. I knelt beside her so we were eye to eye. Her cheeks were streaked with dried tears, her hair messy from where she'd grabbed it in fear, her body still trembling. But she was safe, alive. Home. Is he gone forever? She asked, her voice small but hopeful. I looked at the patrol car as it began to roll forward, Dalton shouting muffled threats from behind the glass. Yes, I said softly, he will never touch our family again. She wrapped her arms around my neck, holding on as if the world could disappear and she'd still be safe if she held tight enough. I lifted her from the ground and hugged her back, feeling her heartbeat against mine, fast, shaky, but real. The sun hovered low above the lake, casting gold across the water. The same place where fear had entered our lives in a single scream now shimmered with warm daylight, as if trying to comfort us. Pine trees swayed in a gentle breeze, whispering through the branches like the mountains themselves were finally exhaling. One by one, the patrol cars drove away, engines rumbling down the dirt road. The lights faded, the noise faded, and slowly the forest returned to silence. For the first time since the start of this nightmare, the world felt still, calm, safe. Ours again. I carried my daughter toward the cabin. She rested her head on my shoulder, exhausted. Every few steps she tightened her arms around me as if reassuring herself that I was real. Inside the cabin, my wife rushed forward and pulled us both into a fierce embrace. My daughter broke down completely, crying into her mother's chest, while my wife stroked her hair, whispering, "It's over, honey, it's really over." I stood there for a moment, holding them both, letting the weight of the day settle. Onto my shoulders, some people think being a police chief is a job. Paperwork, meetings, patrol schedules, community events. But today proved something else. Being a chief isn't about authority. It's about responsibility. It's about standing between danger and the people you love. It's about being the shield when evil knocks too close to home. I watched from the porch as the last squad car vanished beyond the trees. The sun finally dipped below the mountains, turning the sky orange and purple. Birds returned to the branches. The lake glowed gently under the disappearing light. A peaceful evening, a peaceful home, a peaceful family. All of it almost taken away by one man who believed fear made him untouchable. But today proved something important. Fear doesn't rule here. Justice does. I closed the cabin door behind us, locking it with a quiet click. My daughter clung to me again, her small voice muffled against my shirt. "Daddy, will you always protect me?" I kissed the top of her head. "Always," I said. "That's my promise." And I meant it, with everything I had, with everything I was. Justice wasn't just served today. It became personal.